By the way, Pennsylvania has now seen all of this. They didn't know because it was so quick. They had a vote, they voted, but now they see all this stuff. It's all come to light. It doesn't happen that fast. And they want to recertify their vote. They want to recertify. But the only way that can happen is if Mike Pence agrees to send it back. Mike Pence has to agree to send it back. And many people in Congress want it sent back.
Doing it, I might get in trouble for it, but we've been on a 3-hour break. Nobody's here. They said that they were ahead in counting, that they had counted too much, or ahead in counting. I don't know what it means to be ahead in counting ballots when we still have ballots to be counted. And now what they're doing is they're organizing, and organizing essentially means that they're looking through the secrecy envelopes to make sure nothing's left behind. And then there's black bags of stuff. If you see behind me, there's black bags. I don't know what those black bags are. I don't know why they're there. What's in them? Nobody really knows what's in them.
Oh my God. Hi. Hey, so you with the election? You're the Bureau of Elections, right?
Well, I'm just a volunteer.
We're just wondering what, okay, I understand you're a volunteer and you're just doing your job. What's all these? Are these mail-in ballots or what's these coming in?
What are these?
Uh-huh.
These are my in tape here?
What's that?
Am I in tape as well?
Yeah, because we're wondering why are ballots being handled down here and not up there with the elections. So we're curious about that.
Okay, yeah, the gentleman who's in charge of this, I think, should be right back down.
What's his name?
Gosh, what is his name? Do you know his name?
Are you volunteer or employee?
I'm a poll watcher.
Okay.
Okay?
Well,
I'm a poll.
supervisor will be back here.
So what's his name?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just volunteer.
And you're a volunteer? What kind of volunteer are you? With the elections?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just curious.
While voter fraud deniers continue to proclaim the perfection of the U.S. election system, skeptics are looking at irregular patterns in vote data. In particular, software irregularities that would switch votes from President Trump to Joe Biden. Dominion Voting Systems is one such software that seemed to have a pattern of switching votes from Trump to Biden. How easily could bad actors have used Dominion to switch thousands of votes and alter an election? County by county, the answer is shocking. One American News spoke with Ron Watkins, a large systems technical analyst who has been poring over the Dominion Systems manual.
Of course, I was looking at this manual with the mindset of a penetration tester, of which I am. I'm reading the manual with a discerning eye and trying to figure out which parts of the system could be abused by end users. The physical security of the device is the first step to security. If you can't secure the physical device, then you have no security. It's impossible to have security if you don't secure the physical device.
Working off the Dominion manual and public request documents from Pennsylvania's Secretary of State, Watkins says the vulnerabilities of Dominion reside in the fact that administrative access is so easy to attain. With administrative access comes direct access to ballots and how they are counted.
So you have the issue of the person who is inside the tabulation machine, which is just a normal Windows 10 computer. Are they manipulating the votes before it goes to the flash drive? And then you have the next issue, which is now the votes are on the flash drive. How does that flash drive get to the county commissioner or whoever is assigned to accept the flash drive? Is the same flash drive being sent over? So you could swap the flash drive. Theoretically, there's no accountability there. And then once the county commissioner or whoever accepts that flash drive gets the flash drive, do you trust them to not go in and edit the contents before they report it? So another issue is the keys. The keys to the machine are digital devices. It's unclear what the device is. It might be like an RFID device or USB or something, but it is clear that it's a digital device that holds some kind of cryptographic key on it. If you lose this physical key, you lose absolute security of the entire precinct. So, for example, if, say, Philadelphia was storing these keys in a warehouse and they were robbed and the only thing stolen were these keys and a laptop, then you should consider their entire election to be illegitimate because they have lost the physical security of the system, which is the most important part of information security.
And that's exactly what happened in Philadelphia just 1 month before the election. USB drives and a laptop had been stolen from a key precinct in Philadelphia. On Election Day, Biden overtook Trump's 800,000 vote lead in the dark of night. According to these tabulating machines, Biden surpassed Trump by nearly 60,000 votes statewide, a lead found in one county, the county from which a thief stole USB keys and a laptop to the precinct's ballot machines the month prior.
A46 version 1.03. What's the version? 1.03.
I'm Richard DeMiller. I'm a professor of computer science at Georgia Tech. Let's head up towards the scanners.
Simple case of engineering. Right.
It looks like he has a USB connection into the scanner.
The serial console on the back gives us a root check.
That means you have control of the machine.
We have full control of that, and then we can change the results of what it's scanning.
This is the way that you get data in and out of the operating system that runs on this machine.
My computer is connected to the machine. This is a serial cable, and it's connected to the back of the machine. Take off the back of the machine, and there's a serial port, and that gives us full root access with no password.
There's no security subsystem on this.
Nope, there's no password. With this kind of access, you could rewrite the code that's running on there and get it to count votes in whatever way you want. You could do this in advance of election night, and then wait for the results to come in.
You could control the election results.
Either way, as long as I had physical access to either plug something in or take off the back and plug something in there.
But you just need that access briefly.
Once, yes, very briefly.
About how long?
If you had this all prepped and ready to go, a minute.
This is easily possible for somebody to get into these machines because they are unsecured for such long periods of time. I'm Marilyn Marks, the Executive Director of Coalition for Good Governance. I have done research on and personally watched 150 elections at least in the context of our lawsuit against Georgia to get rid of the DRE machines. Two of our experts and I went to the closing of the polls in one of the recent elections. At the end of the closing of the polls, the poll workers left us there with about 6 voting machines by ourselves. I was with 2 guys who could have gotten into those machines in a matter of seconds and put in malware.
My name is Joseph Kanairi, and I am the CEO and Chief Scientist of Free and Fair. The machine we're in front of is a central count scanner. It's the ES&S Model 650. It's, to our knowledge, the most widely deployed central count scanner in America. Anytime you do early voting or provisional voting, or anytime you're in a state where they do central tabulation of all the ballots, so they bring them to one place, this is the kind of high-speed scanner they would use to count ballots. Historically, these machines were examined, and they determined there was a number of serious problems with them by virtue of messing with the zip disk. Just turn it on for 3 minutes and stick a disk in, wait 1 minute, and then walk away. You're able to change the behavior of the machine any way you want, including changing the results of an election. This is an ancient operating system. It's never seen any security patches ever since.
It's probably easier to do all of this by just plugging in.
So this probably came from a server someplace.
I have no idea where they're getting their program.
We downloaded an image of the operating system, the software that runs on this machine, from a Russian server.
But could a hacker actually change your vote? Federal officials are adamant that that would be nearly impossible. But is that correct? Senior correspondent Eric Shawn investigates.
Can a machine be hacked?
I have demonstrated how to hack the ABC Advantage voting machines that we use in New Jersey.
He is the bane of election officials because Princeton University professor Andrew Appel says a touchscreen voting machine, the type used in about 10 states, can be tampered with.
I unlock the back door.
In 2008, he demonstrated how, as part of an election lawsuit against New Jersey officials. Well, he notes there has been no documented case of a machine actually being hacked this way in a U.S. election. He says it could happen by simply swapping the machine's computer chip for his own.
And I'll just have to replace this one ROM chip with a fraudulent computer program.
He was able to change the votes the machine counted.
I figured out how to make a slightly different computer program that just before the close of the polls, it shifts some votes around from one candidate to another. And I wrote that computer program onto a memory chip like this. And now to hack a voting machine, you have to get 7 minutes alone with it with a screwdriver.
Our experience here in this office, we all concur that we have not seen one documented case in machine being compromised.
John Brzezowski, the Deputy Superintendent of Elections in Hudson County, New Jersey, insists in real life it cannot be done. He points to multiple redundant safeguards that protect machines. They are locked in secure areas under camera surveillance, and broken security tape on vital parts would show any violation.
I don't know how you could possibly do that to 500 machines and get the secrecy and the time to do so. I don't believe that's possible.
But the professor insists it is.
The good news is it's not something you can easily do from Russia.
But the bad news?
But the bad news is that it really is possible to do locally.
Well, the voting machine company Dominion told us the demonstration is not a realistic assessment, not a credible test, they say, because it was not an actual election. But Professor Appel says he's exposed to weakness, and it shows we should vote in machines with paper ballots for proof. By the way, here's the chip. It costs $4.
Thank you, senators and representatives, for inviting me to this important hearing. My name is Justin C. Queder, Kweder. I am a resident and registered voter in the city and county of Philadelphia. I'm an attorney. I am barred here in the Commonwealth. I am a volunteer certified GOP canvass observer. I was present at the Philadelphia Convention Center during the pre-canvass, canvass processing, and counting of the ballots cast in this year's general election. I was first present as an observer at the Convention Center and at the counts on Election Day. I returned as a volunteer observer to watch the process every day for the next 10 days. I approximate I was there for about 85 hours over those 10 days. Part of the reason that I kept going back was so that I could authoritatively speak about what I saw. And again, thank you for letting me be here. Because what I saw was problematic, to say the least. I can tell you that I am an eyewitness to many issues and irregularities that were observed in Philadelphia with the processing and counting of the vote. I was a witness to too many issues and irregularities to cover in a brief opening statement. And as such, I will now focus on just 2 issues that I did personally observe. First, The Philadelphia Board of Elections processed hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots with zero civilian oversight or observation. The mail-in ballots were handled, processed, opened, and counted in Hall F of the Convention Center. Hall F is a vast room, approximately 350 feet by 350 feet. That's about 120,000 square feet. The Board of Elections erected a fence approximately 50 feet into the hall that ran the length of the room. All observers were corralled behind the fence. More than 100 board workers processed and opened mail-in ballots on the other side of the fence. These masked workers were arranged throughout the 120,000 square feet at a distance from the observers of about 10 feet to more than 200 feet away from us. Unlike what some may have reported in the media, the vast majority, and I'd estimate at least 96% of the board workers were processing mail-in ballots 15 to 200 plus feet from us. Due to the distance of the workers from the erected fences, it was impossible for me or any observer to see what the workers were doing with any type of specificity. The observers were not able to challenge any decision or determination being made about the processing of these mail-in ballots. No civilian oversight over hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots, zero opportunity for observers to observe, challenge, or inspect the mail-ins being opened. I find this to be an issue and to be irregular. Move on to the second point, the pink highlighted duplicate ballots, which I haven't heard about, at least not in media. As the weeks progressed, the observers were informed that the board was going to be duplicating damaged mail-in ballots that could not be read by the scanners. I was told that there were more than 5,000 of these damaged ballots. I was also told that the actual number was unknown and could be much higher. The process for duplicating these ballots was for two workers to work as a pair. One worker reading out loud what was marked on the original damaged ballot, and the second worker using a pink highlighter to mark the choice on the duplicate ballot. The board's plan then was to run the pink highlighted ballots through the scanners where they would be counted as votes. The board workers did this pink highlighter duplication work over the course of a couple days until thousands of ballots were duplicated with these pink highlighters. On Thursday, November 12th, the observers were informed that the pink highlighter could not be read by the scanners. They all had to be done again. All of the duplicated mail-in ballots had to be fixed. And the Philadelphia Board of Elections solution to this problem was to give the workers who were working alone, individually, stacks of hundreds of what amounted to blank mail-in ballots. And the workers individually were to fill in the correct highlighted ovals with dark pen. No observation. They were marking thousands of blank mail-in ballots. The workers did this double recreation work for hours before the observers realized what was going on, because we weren't told what was going on. Only when the observers confronted the deputy commissioner about this irregularity was a system set up where the workers would show the observers each double recreated mail-in ballot by flashing at them for a second from a distance of 6 to 20 feet away, for as good as that was. Thousands of mail-in ballots were ultimately counted in this way. Again, I find this to be an issue and to be irregular. As Senator Mastriano recently said, elections are a fundamental principle of our democracy. Unfortunately, Pennsylvanians have lost faith in the electoral system, end quote. And let me add a quote that Philadelphia City Commissioner of Elections Al Schmidt just made when he said about these recent elections in Philadelphia that these were the most secure and transparent elections in Philadelphia's history, end quote. Now, I wasn't around for every election in Philadelphia's history, but I can tell you as an eyewitness, for 10 days, for more than 80 hours, what I saw was not a secure and transparent election. There are major concerns about the legitimacy of hundreds of thousands of ballots that were counted in Philadelphia.
About 18 months ago, I became a volunteer and assisted with a campaign for a magisterial judge. In that process, I was approached by my current chairman and became an appointed committee woman for the Bethel Township Republican Party. In conjunction with my committee position, I also started volunteering for the Trump campaign, registering voters, and assisting with events. During this time, I started a watchdog group and reached out to the Thomas More Society. Now associates, we've been focusing our efforts in election integrity. Our greatest efforts have been following closely the newly elected and completely Democrat-run Delaware County Council and the Democrat Majority Election Board. This also includes any and all contractors, support staff, and any key players involved. What we found was actually concerning. Not only was private grant money used from the Center for Tech and Life owned by Google and Mark Zuckerberg, but pop-up voter sites were also approved. These pop-up voter sites were placed in heavily Democrat cities, including Chester and Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, in which case the grant money from the CTCL was used to pay for electioneering. It was literally a one-stop shop. Walk in, apply, get your ballot, submit, and you were out the door. But where this didn't take place was in heavily Republican and independent areas. Let's also make note that the voting machine warehouse supervisor is a Bernie Sanders delegate, who was also solely responsible for every scanner, machine, V-card, and all machines with absolutely zero experience in this area. The real story so the real story is the $2.1 million spent to move the counting center from the courthouse in Media, Pennsylvania, which has been something that has been done for decades, to the wharf in Chester, Pennsylvania. Let me explain to you the layout of the counting center. It is in the middle of a huge parking lot, which sits back on Seaport Drive next to loading docks. It has multi-million-dollar connections to the company Power HRG and Subaru Park Soccer Stadium. The counting center was on the first floor, in which there were multiple places to bring in ballots in and out of, elevators and many rooms in which workers had access. I was there for 3 straight days. What became of concern was the back room, which had no observers, no line of sight or transparency into the process. There was no cooperation, complete resistance from election night and every day after. It took until our lawyer got an injunction to get into that back room in which pre-canvassing was transpiring. Even with an injunction, which was a joke, we were granted 5 minutes every 2 hours, and the setup was sitting in a chair 20 feet from any physical ballot. I truly wish I had enough time today to recreate what I witnessed and felt during those moments, but we did not gather here today just for me and my experience, but rather a collection of experiences from Americans like myself. What I hope to achieve is for the public to understand is that we have stuck our necks out, have been intimidated, threatened, bullied, have spent countless hours away from our families, friends, and jobs. We have signed affidavits under penalty of perjury, which should be consideration enough to know that this is a very serious issue. I'm here for one thing only, and that is to speak the truth. This is not about party. This is about my country. Every American deserves transparency, truth, and be able to question those in power without fear of intimidation, bullying, or backlash.
Tough group to follow. My name is Gregory Stenstrom. I'm from Delaware County. I'm a father, a family man. I was a former commanding officer and executive officer in the Navy. I'm a veteran of foreign wars. I'm a CEO of my own private company. I'm a data scientist. I'm a forensic computer scientist. I'm an expert in security and fraud. Leah had recruited me for this election, and I was glad. Thank you for that. So for the first part of the day, I was a poll watcher in the city of Chester. And I was with just another former U.S. Marine officer. And the two of us were the only GOP poll watchers in the city of Chester, which is about 40,000 people. Because of the consolidation for COVID, there were 7 polls we were allowed, that we were able to make it to in 22 precincts. What we saw out there was pretty orderly and exciting. People were excited to vote. One of the things we saw out in the field was that quite a few people had done mail-in ballots. So they came in and they hadn't been updated in the Delaware County database yet. So they would come in and say, the database is not showing me on the database, I'd like to vote. So the process, one of the processes was to give them a provisional ballot. And then they would vote provisionally, and then later on, their vote would be sorted out. That didn't happen. I observed, and the gentleman who was with me observed 7 different polls where the people were given a regular ballot. So they cast a vote, put it in. And we let it happen a few times. We didn't jump all over them. It happened a couple of times. We went up. In all cases, the election judges were very forthcoming, very polite. They apologized, and they said they couldn't do it. But that somewhat spurred me to go down to the counting center, which Leah described. It's on Seaport Ave. It's a remote building, not much around it. And I wanted to take a look. All day long, I've been told that there were 10 to 20 GOP poll watchers down there, and that everything was well in hand. And out of curiosity, I decided to go down. I arrived at 6 o'clock with 4 other gentlemen, again, foreign military and some good citizens from Delaware County. And we weren't allowed to get in until 11 o'clock at night, and we had to get some legal help to get us. So it took 5 hours to get upstairs. After that, what we saw here is what I saw is I really think the crux of this in Delaware County is, as an expert in this, I think it's impossible to verify the validity of about 100,000 to 120,000 votes. Now, Delaware County's got 425,000 registered voters. Approximately 300,000 of them voted. I don't know what the exact number ended up. Mayor Giuliani had nailed that number. But of that number, over 100,000 are in question in my mind. What I saw as a forensics expert was an election process that was forensically destructive in the manner it was conducted, with the envelopes being separated from the ballots and gone to the other side of the room. And the problem with that from being forensically destructive is that when you go to do a recount, okay, the machines do a pretty good job of recounting. So if I have 120,000 ballots, mail-in ballots at one side of the room and envelopes at the other side of the room, it's still going to come out 102,000 votes for Vice President Biden and 18,000 votes for President Trump. I don't care how many times you recount those votes, the ballot's going to come out the same every time. So the notion of a recount in a forensically destructive process doesn't work very well. What I saw there was a chain of custody in all cases that was broken. It was broken for the mail-in ballots, the Dropbox ballots, the election day USB card flash drives. In all cases, the chain of custody and the procedures that were defined by the Delaware County Board of Elections and Election Process Review they didn't follow one. I couldn't even redline this multi-page document because the entire document would be, they didn't follow any of the procedures. So I personally observed USB cards being uploaded to the voting machines by the voting machine warehouse supervisor on multiple occasions. I saw this personally. I brought it to the attention of the deputy sheriff who was there stationed, who was a senior law enforcement officer, and I brought it to the attention of the clerk of elections. I brought it to their attention, I objected, and I said, this person is not being observed, he's not part of the process that I can see, and he's walking in with baggies, which we have pictures of, and it was submitted in our affidavits, and he was sticking these USBs into the machines. So I personally witnessed over that happened 24 times, over 24 times. We have multiple other witnesses to start, including Democrat poll watchers. And we were told, I was told the next day by the solicitors, well, actually not the solicitor, but the attorney that we had secured, that they said every election they leave a couple of USBs in the voting machines and they're brought back, and generally the warehouse manager comes over and puts them in. So in talking to U.S. Attorney General McSwain and other law enforcement officers, I found out that was not the case. That generally, more than 2 is unusual. So they denied they did it, but as of today, 47 USB cards are missing, and they're nowhere to be found. So I was told personally that these 24 to 30 cards that were uploaded weren't there. Those cards, I demanded that they didn't update the vote live time. They only updated it about once every 2 or 3 hours. I demanded they uploaded the vote so I could see what the result was, and it was 50,000 votes. And I think as a computer scientist, an American, and a patriot, it doesn't matter who those 50,000 votes were. I'll tell you they were for Vice President Biden. But what was shocking to me as an American, as someone who has gone to sea, gone to war, that that could even happen. So several other things that came up was on Thursday, it took us 3 days for them to obey the court order that I secured with Leah's help and the help of the Thomas More Society, who we thank incredibly good patriots. They got us in there. They got the order for us to get in and watch, look at the back offices, which were locked for 5 minutes every 2 hours. I went in, I was the first one allowed to go in at 1:30 on Thursday, and then again at 3:30 for 5 minutes. The county solicitor had a stopwatch. On the first time, I was not allowed to touch anything. The second time I did. What I observed in the locked room in the back office was 70,000 unopened mail-in ballots. They were in boxes of 500, stacked in neatly. The gentleman that came in with me was a Democrat poll watcher, is a forensic pathologist, a very detailed, very dedicated man, and he took meticulous notes as well. And I verified with him, are you seeing what I'm seeing? We both agreed as GOP poll watchers and a Democrat poll watcher that we had witnessed 60 to 70,000. We had a little bit of a disagreement there. The problem with that was by that time, the mail-in ballots had already been counted. So 120,000 mail-in ballots had already been counted, posted, and done. So my question is, where did the 70,000 ballots go? And nobody knows. We have a picture in here of a large number of boxes that I took that were filled with what appeared to be ballots, sitting by the Blue Crest machine. They were there for about 3 hours, and then they disappeared. I found it notable when I watched it, the first when they were taking the ballots up and down. I said, I am an expert in fraud. I saw the ballots going up multiple elevators and racks. And I think a lot of well-meaning people and a lot of honest people were there doing that. They were trying to participate in the process. And I would say that 99% of the people there, the way the process was designed, I believe that people thought it was a non-fraudulent process. I heard that said many times. I was, I said, there's no fraud going on here. I said, well, I'm not, I didn't even bring that up. But I think people saw what they wanted to see, and they saw what was intended for them to see. I called it at one point Kabuki Theater. I said it was all designed for us to see it. It was entertaining. There were cameras on it. When we finally got into the back room where the votes were being ingested, as a data scientist, I want to see where the data is coming in. And I wanted to know the universe of the votes. Well, the universe of the votes was only supposed to be 120,000 mail-in ballots. We were told there were 6,000 ballots remaining. So I said, okay, we have a universe of 126,000 votes. And then when I get back there, the universe wasn't 126,000 votes. The universe was 200,000 votes. So that's a problem. I think the last thing I want, a couple of other things, is the Blue Crest sorter machine was only manned by one person. People ask me all the time, how do people commit crimes? I know there's a lot of theories here, and I always look for the simplest thing. People that stuff, sticking USB sticks in, putting ballots in, very simple thing, only takes a couple of people. Doesn't take a big conspiracy. I think people look at things and they use inflammatory words and, like fraud and so forth. As a forensic computer scientist, my interest is in the data. Where did it go? Where did the spoilage go? How did the data come in and go out of the system? So I think as a scientist, we need to look at that. We need to audit that. What was really upsetting to me, the most upsetting, was I had spoke to multiple law enforcement agencies and literally begged multiple law enforcement agencies to say, go in. And it's in order to prove, prove that nothing's happening. You can either exonerate yourselves in the process or refute what I'm saying, please. It's a very simple process. Just go get the forensic evidence from the computers. It's a simple process. You turn the computer off. It's non-destructive. It takes moments, maybe half an hour, 20 minutes to do it properly and collect the evidence. You open the computer up. You take a device called a bit blocker. You put it in the hard drive. It's done under the observation of law enforcement officers. They take a forensic image of the drive, put it all back together. It wouldn't have taken more than an hour to image all 5 machines. That was never done, despite my objections, and that was 3 weeks ago. Lastly, when they said, well, we've got all the forensic records and so forth, we just learned 2 days ago that virtually all chain of custody logs, records, yellow sheets, everything was gone. All forensic evidence, all custody sheets in Delaware County are gone. They had a signing party where they sat down, and poll workers were invited back to recreate those logs, and our understanding as of today was that they were unsuccessful in getting them all. So we have a situation where we have 100,000 ballots to 120,000 ballots, both mail-in and USB, they're in question. Now, there's no cure for this. There's no remedy for this. As a home charter, we could have a re-election in Delaware County for our own representatives within our own town, but there's no cure for that for the President of the United States. And I don't believe as a citizen and an observer to this that anybody could certify that vote in any good conscience. And if the Democrats that were part of this process, had done things, followed their own procedures, which they created almost unilaterally, we would be in a situation where they could exonerate themselves and they could say, Mr. Stenstrom, you've been misinformed. We have evidence here that refutes what you say. But that's not the case. They can't do that. So I say, if you can't certify that vote, and you can't certify 100,000 votes out of 300,000, then you can't certify Delaware County. And I'm done, and thank you for your time and patience.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Shostokis. I'm an attorney, licensed to practice law in Illinois and Florida. Some time ago, I was a Cook County Assistant State's Attorney prosecutor, and during that time, I actually did election law enforcement during the course of that time, including seeing to it that people had appropriate access and precinct openings and closings, that machines were zeroed out. Since that time, I've either been a candidate or a campaign in over 10 other individual elections. And in 2016, I actually worked as a volunteer for the Trump-Rubio campaign in Broward County, Florida. Discovered them opening mail-in ballots in a locked room. Before that was all said and done, we actually had a Broward County judge monitoring everybody's access. He was actually on site monitoring everybody's access to see to it that could happen, see to it that everybody would have appropriate access. Currently, I am lead counsel in conjunction with Judicial Watch in a suit called Illinois Conservative Union versus the Illinois State Board of Elections for violations of the board in terms of the National Voter Registration Act. Given that kind of background to give you some idea of where I'm coming from on this subject. On October 24th this year, I came to Pittsburgh as a volunteer with Lawyers for Trump, and I was asked to organize folks to do monitoring of the pre-canvass activities during the course of the next week. About myself with some of the volunteers made over 500 phone calls. We recruited 50 individuals that were willing to come and canvass or come and monitor the pre-canvass, and along with 25 other out-of-state lawyer volunteers. We had organized all this because, of course, we had 19 in Allegheny County, there were 19 Republicans on the ballot, and so we were able to have credentials through the RCAC for 19 watchers at any given moment. So we had to organize them. So we organized everybody during the course of time, and they had given us credentials in advance. And then 2 days before the election, the Friday before the election, we got a call from the electoral board and said, oh, by the way, you need to submit everybody's credentials in advance, and you need to have everybody's signatures on the credentials that you sign in advance. And of course, we'd already had put together a team of 70. We'd allocated them 4 hours of time over in 4-hour shift to be able to monitor through the course of the whole period of time. And then over the next 3 days, we scrambled like heck to try and get signatures from the various volunteers and other counsel that were assisting us. Needless to say, we lost about 25 folks that we were unable to get the credentials to in advance and get the signatures back and forth and all the things necessary to do that. So I wanted to mention that you're hearing about global, huge global issues, but it goes down to the petty as well. It goes down to the petty as well in terms of interfering with his access and interfering with changing rules. I know Secretary Booker changed some huge rules, but the local boards, day in and day out, were changing rules as well to make the monitoring process next to impossible. At any rate, we did that, and then we wound up. I went with a group at about 6:45 on election day to 901 Pennsylvania Avenue in Allegheny County, where they were doing the pre-canvass. And at the time when we arrived, we were herded into what best known as the corral. I'm sure you've kind of seen or heard about those things. It was a fenced-in area that was the fence was maybe 2.5, 3 feet high. Closest anybody could get would do make any observations was maybe 15, 20 feet from the closest ballot processor to the maybe 150 feet, because we were in about a 20,000 square foot area where the biggest room was taking place, biggest activity was taking place. But I would mention that the mail-in ballots were coming into that room already sliced open at the top. We have no idea when or where the slicing took place, where the opening took place, or what was in fact inside those ballots, inside those mail-in envelopes. At that point in time, folks were then separating the mail-in ballot from the secrecy envelope. You can see that that's exactly what they're doing. They put one on the side and one on the other side, and then they take them and put them someplace, and I have no idea. And then the secrecy envelopes would go to another slicing machine, and that'd be sliced open. And at that point, then the ballots would come back and they'd be divided from the secrecy envelopes. We had really no concept of what was going on. In the room next door, there was a smaller room around the corner that you had to leave the 20,000 square foot room. There was one about 7,500 square feet, and in that room there was a machine. The machine would be apparently sorting things by the barcodes, and then eventually somehow or other people would come in with big armloads of ballots from the other room. Apparently with no provenance, no explanation of where they came from. And here's an interesting thing that you guys might consider when you're doing this in the future. One of the biggest bottlenecks would take place at this point in time, because all these ballots came in tri-folded, right? And all the ballots had to be flattened. And so they would take the ballots and put them under big stacks of reams and reams of paper to flatten them out, and then there'd be workers kneading the ballots to try and make them so that they could go through the machines. And when everybody's saying, well, you haven't counted anything for X number of hours, and they say, well, we're trying to flatten the ballots. It was absurd and obscene. So at any rate, that was when everybody was waiting. That's what was going on. They're flattening the ballots for most part. And then there was about 6 machines where they were feeding the ballots. And while they had 6 machines feeding the ballots, as they would go in, 2 or 3 would kick out to a different tray than the other tray. And workers sometimes would take the ones that weren't kicked out and put them in a stack, and then sometimes you'd run all of them through again, and sometimes run 2 or 3. We never had any idea if they were zeroing out a machine, what they were doing. I asked the solicitor, the county solicitor who was there. I said, what's going on? He told me that this was a Pitney Bowes representative working there that had been sworn in as a county representative, and that sometimes the ballot machine doesn't count those things, and then so he runs them through. But there was absolutely no provenance to what was going on in the counting machines. I have no idea, because of course they would just take stacks of ballots that had been sitting under reams of paper trying to be flattened and then run them through the machine. So we have no idea about that. And so at one point I asked the county solicitor, I said, can you describe for me the journey of a ballot from the time it hits the door to the time that it's counted? Where does it go? What's the process, et cetera? I had a short answer: no. I then asked him, I said, can you give me any written protocol about what is supposed to happen? It hits the door, then it goes to a machine theoretically sorted by barcodes, from what I understood from someone else, so that if there's a challenge in advance of the election, they know where to look. Because of course at 5 p.m. on the Friday before elections, you can challenge things for people having died and a few other reasons. And but then I asked, I said, is there any written protocol for that? And he said, no, we have no written protocol for what we're conducting, what we're doing here. So he answered, he's supposed to be the one giving legal advice to people on how to legally handle ballots. And he tells me that he doesn't know how they're handled, and he tells me that there is no written protocol on how they're supposed to be handled. So I might suggest that there was just literally no way to change. There was no way to challenge. There was no way to look at those ballots. And I would say, in my experience, electoral experience, one of the things that legitimizes elections is the ability of not a disinterested third party to review what the process is, but actually an adversarial third party to review what the process is. And this was completely and utterly absent. I had about 25 other affidavits from other folks that had joined me during the time that had been part of this, that described essentially the same thing over there in Allegheny County. Most of whom were attorneys and had been versed on the comings and goings of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which I might suggest ultimately the last decision in Ray canvassing, when Pennsylvania Supreme Court ultimately said that it doesn't matter how far you're away from the ballots because you don't have the right to challenge anything anyway. I read the opinion and I said to myself, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just called off elections in the state of Pennsylvania. And I would suggest that the remedy for what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court does lies with the distinguished legislators that are before me. But the fact is if there is no opportunity for anybody to look at them, and the court has the temerity to say, it doesn't matter if you come in or not, it doesn't matter how far you are, because even if you're there, you don't have the right to do anything.
But you could summarize, sir. We are running out
Yes,
of time.
I'm sorry. I apologize for being an attorney. No, I apologize, Senator. But I just, I'll summarize in one thing. One of the guarantees in the United States Constitution is that, in fact, every state shall have a Republican form of government. And I would suggest to you, if the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania determines that they're going to run the state and allow the local election authorities to essentially appoint winners, the state of Pennsylvania no longer meets that guarantee as a Republican form of government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Senator, Colonel, and gentlemen, ladies. My name is Phil Waldron. I'm
retired Army Colonel, 30 years. Spent the first half of my career, just like Colonel Mastriano here, as a cavalry officer conducting armed reconnaissance, counter reconnaissance. Last half of my career spent in information warfare as a psychological operations officer and information operations officer. Conducted computer network operations, electronic warfare, special electronic warfare, deception, counter deception, and OPSEC, and a couple other specialties. So I spent all of my time as an operations officer. My perspective looking at this this problem set is how to break in, how to break it, how to destroy it, how to manipulate it. And my team has been researching this specific issue since August, but we're working with another team that's been intently working on this problem set, the voting machine manipulation, for 2 years, since the Ted Cruz and Beto race in Texas in 2018 and the Kentucky governor's race, where there were significant anomalies observed. And I'd like to add that there are many, many more teams like ours, small teams that are joined in this fight, and they're throwing the flag left and right. So there's a lot of folks who are recognizing anomalies. The voting systems in the U.S. And in Pennsylvania were built to be manipulated. They've been used in elections around the world and stolen elections around the world. In Venezuela, Italy, Argentina, Singapore, Bolivia, as close as 2 weeks ago. But Philadelphia uses ES&S, Pittsburgh uses Dominion, other counties in Pennsylvania use Dominion and other systems. So what's the real deal? So all these election systems have a common DNA. SGO Smartmatic sold Sequoia voting systems to Dominion in 2010, and then the Devo company spun off Premier Election Systems to Dominion as a result of an antitrust suit. So the bottom line is that these systems have similar code and similar functions. And just so you know, I know there have been statements to the contrary, but I personally debriefed the son of a Cuban intelligence officer who had firsthand knowledge of Hugo Chavez's family members who told him not to worry about the populist threat against Maduro's election in Venezuela, quote unquote, that it was guaranteed. Their father invested the money to build the SGO voting machine system. So I have no reason to doubt this gentleman. He's sworn an affidavit to this effect. But that's the root of the SGO voting machines. So these systems are not what you've been told. They are connected to the internet and servers outside of the U.S. They're connected from top to the bottom in the middle. There is no transparency, as our previous witnesses mentioned, as to how the voter information is processed, how and where it's stored. The voting record is able to be modified and or deleted by operators, administrators, and outside threats. Operators can assign votes for write-in ballots, blank ballots, or error ballots in large numbers so that they can be directed toward one candidate or another at the operator's or supervisor's discretion. And many experts have published how easily these machines can be hacked to manipulate votes. As a matter of fact, one of our white hat hackers previously discovered a malware that's present on the servers that captures every login and every password of every operator down to the precinct level that logs into one of these systems. That's just like giving the password to your bank account out, putting it on the dark web. It's not going to be there very long. And just so you probably are all aware, on 30 September, an election storage facility was robbed in your state. 30 USB devices were stolen and a laptop. Those USB devices more than likely had encryption devices, and you just heard another previous witness talk about the non-standard use of the USB storage devices. So these systems, in a nutshell, allow authorized and unauthorized users to cancel votes, shift votes, preload votes, vote blank ballots, all in real time and in large numbers. They're connected from the top to the bottom. So one bad actor or a team of bad actors can have equally negative inputs. It's been described by another person in another state that we're working with, just like the lotto. Whoever organizes the lotto is always going to win. It's controlling the numbers and it's controlling the margins. Our experts and other academics believe that up to 1.2 million Pennsylvania votes could have been altered or fraudulent. This is what we discovered in the last 22 days. Really, only a detailed forensic analysis of the actual machines and software will truly show how many Pennsylvania citizens have had their civil rights violated. So to use these type of machines with little or no audit trails, little or no transparency of how the votes are processed, where they go, where they're stored, will never leave the public satisfied that we truly have a representative democracy. Want to share with you one chart. I believe it's in your package. So what our team has done is focused on the spike anomalies. And these are events where a numerical amount of votes are processed in a time period that's not feasible or mechanically possible under normal circumstances. I believe Greg Stenstrom mentioned earlier the processing of these ballots through machines. There's a manufacturer's specified rate of speed that a number of ballots can be imaged and processed. These spike anomalies in this chart really show where for us to look forensically to actually determine what happened with these votes. Our team has looked at these systems, and there are a dozen ways to interdict the voting process in these, whether it's mail-in ballot manipulations. They can scan and allocate votes, blank votes, where there was 70,000 votes left in the back room. There's just lots of ways to interdict these systems.
Representative Ryan. First of all, thank you very much, Mayor, for being here and for all the testifiers. 16 years ago this week, I was called out of retirement and recalled active duty to go to Iraq to do the elections in Iraq in January 30th, 2005. That was an extraordinarily secure election. As a former commanding officer of a civil affairs group and psychological operations command, I know how to do elections. And what happened in Pennsylvania from a process control perspective was absolutely a travesty. What I am concerned about is the remedy. How do we go from here? We see that there's a perspective from our council that a 1937 law provided the ability to appoint the electors to the Secretary of State. And I'm curious as to whether or not, sir, you believe a special prosecutor should be appointed at the federal level to look at all these irregularities, or whether or not there is still actions that can be done at the state level to ensure that the goal of what we're attempting to do is to ensure, as we did for the people in Iraq and as I did for the people in Haiti, to ensure that the results are fair, accurate, transparent, and a representation of the will of the people of the United States.
Representative Mall, questions for any of our panelists? This is like our lightning round here to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think what I'm going to do is make more of a statement to throw out a timeline because to try and reiterate what everyone else has already done. A couple of years ago, our Supreme Court in Pennsylvania very illegally redrew congressional maps. It's very clear in our Constitution that is a legislative act. Fast forward a couple of months ago, our Supreme Court rewrote our election law. Again, that needs to be done in statute. It is a legislative act. When it came to the mail-in ballotings, that House bill, I want to say 77, Act 77, I was really kind of taken aback by how eager the governor was to sign that bill. Normally, bills can sit in his desk 8 and almost 10 days before he signs them, or lets them become law on their own, or vetoes them right away, and that one he signed almost instantaneously. And I just kind of wondered. So after I saw what happened in the primary, I wrote House Bill 2626, and this is where it kind of locks it in for me, Mr. Mayor and panelists. In House Bill 2626, I saw where there could possibly be stuffing the boxes. So I said, simply, let's put a barcode on the bottom of every mail-out ballot so that the machine has to read a barcode that was accepted by the elections office. Before that ballot goes out, they zap it. When it comes back, if that barcode doesn't match one of the barcodes that they sent out, it gets kicked out. The governor immediately, as soon as we ran that bill out of committee, said, that hits my desk, it's an automatic veto. Not everybody knows that, but that came to us. We had to literally strip that out of the bill. And I will be reintroducing a bill to barcode any ballot that gets mailed out when we get back, trust me. Then we have the drop boxes, 3 days extra to vote, the ignoring the signatures and ignoring the postmarks. And I have to come to the conclusion that you did also. If it looks like corruption, smells like corruption, it's corruption.
There's potentially some more fraud going on this evening at about 10, 11 p.m. What time is it right now? What time is it happening?
12:01.
It happened about 11:30?
11 p.m.
Okay.
So I'm a volunteer with the Trump campaign. I was told to go to the Philadelphia Convention Center to wait in the lobby to see if I saw anything suspicious. The main thing that we were looking for were large groups of people coming in with suitcases, with bags, and we'd been there for maybe no more than 10 or 15 minutes when we saw a steady stream of individuals coming in with backpacks, purses, getting in, going through the metal detectors. They had credentials to get in. There must have been at least 40 to 50 individuals with backpacks coming through in the past hour. We specifically brought this up to the Philadelphia Police Department. They said, we're going to check with our superiors, let you know if we can check the bags. I asked multiple times. Finally, a deputy commissioner inside came up to me, was questioning me, was being very aggressive, erratic. I said, sir, we just want to make sure the bags are being checked. They're specifically going up to the vote counting area. And when I brought this up, I said, sir, you guys are checking them for weapons, but you're not specifically checking them for ballots. He got very nervous, erratic. He put his hands on his head. He said it's too late to be dealing with this. He immediately went to the Philadelphia Police Department, who then came up to us and said that we needed to leave the lobby, which we had every right to be there. We have a court order from the state that says that we can observe ballots, and we were in the lobby. We weren't even in the voting room. So we sat outside of the Philadelphia Convention Center for probably about 30 minutes. We must have seen dozens of individuals coming in with backpacks and purses late at night. They were granted easy entrance to the facility, and after about 45 minutes, officers came out and said we had to get behind the barricade.
Good morning. This hearing is called to order. I want to first welcome and thank the witnesses for your time and your testimony. Let me start the hearing by saying this hearing should not be controversial. It really shouldn't be. This is something I think we all should want to restore the confidence in our election system. A week ago, when I gave notice of this hearing, there were more standing issues and court cases than there are today. But even though courts have handed down decisions and the Electoral College has awarded Joe Biden 306 electoral votes, a large percentage of the American public does not believe the November election results are legitimate. This is not a sustainable state of affairs in our democratic republic. There are many reasons for this high level of skepticism. It starts with today's climate of hyperpartisanship, which is only exacerbated by the persistent efforts to delegitimize the results of the 2016 election. The corrupt investigation and media coverage of the Russian collusion hoax reduce faith in our institutions, and the ongoing suppression and censorship of conservative perspective by biased media and social media adds fuel to the flames. Senator Grassley's and my investigation and report on the conflicts of interest and foreign financial entanglements of the Biden family is just one example of how media suppression can and does affect the outcome of an election. It is both amazing and galling that all of a sudden, post-election, this has become a news story and a scandal-worthy investigation. With less than a month left in my chairmanship of this committee, the examination of irregularities in the 2020 election will obviously be my last investigation and last hearing as chairman. But oversight into election security should continue into the next Congress because we must restore confidence in the integrity of our voting system. As I said at the start, this effort should be bipartisan. In my statement announcing this hearing, I stated its goal was to, quote, resolve suspicions with full transparency and public awareness. What's wrong with that? That is what good oversight can accomplish. Unfortunately, Senator Schumer and Peters ignored my statement and instead chose to politically attack me in this hearing. On March 7, 2018, it was reported that Senators Klobuchar and Shaheen asked, quote, major vendors of U.S. voting equipment whether they had allowed Russian entities to scrutinize their software, saying the practice could allow Moscow to hack into American election infrastructure. Then last year, on March 26, 2019, Senators Klobuchar, Warner, Reid, and Ranking Member Peters wrote, quote, the integrity of our elections remain under serious threat. Our nation's intelligence agencies continue to raise the alarm that foreign adversaries are actively trying to undermine our system of democracy and will target the 2020 elections as they did in 2016 and 2018 elections.
A combination of older legacy machines and newer systems, vulnerabilities in each present a problem for the security of our democracy, and they must be addressed. And then on December 6, 2019, Senators Warren, Klobuchar, Wyden, and Congressman Pocan wrote, quote, "We are particularly concerned that secretive and trouble-plagued companies owned by private equity firms and responsible for manufacturing and maintaining voting machines and other election administration equipment, quote, have long skimped on security in favor of convenience, leaving voting systems across the country prone to security problems. Moreover," again, this is a quote from that letter, "moreover, when state and local officials work on replacing antiquated machines, many continue to run an old software that will soon be outdated and more vulnerable to hackers." The letter continues. In 2018 alone, voters in South Carolina were reporting machines that switched their votes after they had inputted them. Scanners were rejecting paper ballots in Missouri, and busted machines were causing long lines in Indiana. In addition, these senators write, researchers recently uncovered previously undisclosed vulnerabilities in nearly 3 dozen back-end election systems in 10 states. And just this year, after the Democratic candidate's electronic tally showed he received an improbable 146 votes out of 55,000 cast in a Pennsylvania state judicial election in 2019, the county's Republican chairwoman said, "Nothing went right on election day. Everything went wrong." That's a problem. These problems threaten the integrity of our election. Now again, those were 3 letters from Democrat members of Congress. Now, maybe I missed it, but I don't recall the media or anyone else accusing these 8 congressional Democrats of indulging in, quote, quackery and conspiracy theories, unquote, quote, or their letters of being a, quote, ridiculous charade, unquote, as Senator Schumer did when he used those exact same words attacking me in this hearing on the Senate floor. The fact that our last 2 presidential elections have not been accepted as legitimate by large percentages of the American public is a serious problem that threatens our republic. I do not say that lightly. This hearing is part of what should be ongoing congressional oversight that is meant to transparently address that serious problem.
The president and many of his supporters are, unfortunately, continuing their efforts to undermine the will of the people, disenfranchise voters, and sow the seeds of mistrust and discontent to further their partisan desire for power. Whether intended or not, this hearing gives a platform to conspiracy theories and lies, and it's a destructive exercise that has no place in the United States Senate. Joe Biden won the election more than 5 weeks ago with 306 electoral votes and received the most popular votes for a presidential candidate in American history. All 50 states and the District of Columbia have certified those results. The Electoral College met Monday and all affirmed that Joe Biden will be the president on January 20th, 2021. It's a result that the majority of the American people recognize, along with the leaders of more than 150 countries around the world. Yet even after all of that, significant numbers of Republican elected officials have been slow to publicly acknowledge that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. I appreciate that yesterday, several of my Republican colleagues made their first public comments acknowledging this fact. And I appreciate that even the chairman's rhetoric around this election has evolved over the last 24 hours. But let me be clear, deciding to move forward with this hearing is still dangerous. Elected leaders who are chosen by the voters to help uphold our institutions and democratic values spent weeks either turning a blind eye or parroting provocative rhetoric and false claims about this election. By not speaking out earlier, even though they knew it was wrong, that there was no evidence to support these claims, and that this inflammatory rhetoric is harmful to our democracy, many elected officials gave the president and his supporters license to spread damaging lies about the election. We have known for weeks that there was no widespread voter fraud, a fact that President Trump's own Department of Justice has confirmed. There was no election interference, and the election wasn't rigged. In fact, independent election security officials and the Department of Homeland Security have called this election, quote, the most secure in American history, end of quote. We're going to hear directly from the former director of CISA, who will testify today about that fact. In the face of intimidation from the president and his supporters, including threats of violence and even death, election officials in states across the country certified their results as accurate. More than 50 post-election lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign have been dismissed or withdrawn, including by the United States Supreme Court, because there is simply no evidence to support these claims in a court of law. And despite the title of today's hearing, there were no widespread election irregularities that affected the final outcome. These claims are false, and giving them more oxygen is a grave threat to the future of our democracy. Now, I understand the chairman's desire to ensure our elections run smoothly, and I agree that we need to restore faith and trust in our election process. But I'm concerned that today's hearing will do more harm than good by confusing a few anecdotes about human error with the insidious claims the president has aired. Mistakes do happen in elections, but there's a difference between a clerk making an error that gets caught and corrected during routine audits and calling the entire election fraudulent or stolen when there is no evidence just because you do not like the outcome. Amplifying these obviously false narratives about fraud or irregularities corrodes public trust. It threatens national security, and it weakens our democracy and our standing around the world. Every time the president or his followers make these false claims, they destabilize our relationships with our allies and allow authoritarian adversaries to undercut American democratic leadership around the globe. Democracy and a free society are not guaranteed. We have seen democracies around the world crumble because of similar words and actions. When executives abuse their power, when political leaders work to stifle the free press, and when they delegitimize the principle of one person, one vote, it puts our country on a dangerous path towards authoritarianism. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again, I don't see anything dangerous about evaluating information, about doing legitimate congressional oversight. Nothing dangerous about that whatsoever. As I said in my last hearing, closed-mindedness is a real problem for a lot of the issues we face today. I should have entered in the record the Reuters article from March 7, 2018, describing in the letter from Senators Klobuchar and Shaheen. Also into the record, the March 27, 2019 press release and letter from Senators Klobuchar, Warner, Reed, and Peters, which let me just read a segment from that letter again. The integrity, this is Senator Peters joining and writing this letter. The integrity of our elections remain under serious threat. Our nation's intelligence agencies continue to raise the alarm that foreign adversaries are actively trying to undermine our system of democracy and will target the 2020 elections as they did in 2016 and the 2018 elections. A combination of older legacy machines and newer systems, vulnerabilities in each present a problem for the security of our democracy, and they must be addressed until, I guess right now, let's move on. Let's not worry about this, because if we look at this, it's dangerous to our democracy. Okay. Also, the December 6, 2019 letters written by Senators Warren, Klobuchar, Wyden, and Congressman Pocan to those same equipment manufacturers. I would also like to enter the responses from Dominion and Hart to the March 27th letter, but the ranking member's staff had objection. Do you object to that? The responses? Okay, so we'll enter those in the record.
But you don't hear it by the people who want to deceive you and demoralize you and control you, big tech media. A president of the United States for 4 years with his wonderful son.
Security and Governmental Affairs Committee.
We contributed to the cross-agency effort to protect the 2020 election by surging coordination and collaboration with our partners across the national security space. In conclusion, because of these and other efforts, on November 12, 2020, government and industry representatives from the election security community issued a joint statement reflecting a consensus perspective that the 2020 election was the most secure in U.S. history.